Howdy, folks. It's Howie here. Was recently talking to a couple people that they were surprised that you could actually learn things from comic books. They thought the colorful, silly heroes were just colorful, silly heroes, and they are, but just because it's done in this format does not mean it cannot be serious. I'm not going to delve into some of the really heavy stuff that you can find in comics right now. I will, but not right now. But there are Nobel Prize winning comic books. There's a comic book that is one of Time's top 10 novels to buy. Not top 10 comics, top 10 novels that you need to read. Pulitzers, Nobel Prizes, Hugo. I mean, every award you can win, a comic has won. But we're just going to look at this one. It's called Flashbacks, Terrific Tales About Science and Technology by Mayim. It's not by her. It's edited and kind of a foreword is written by Mayim Bialik. You may know her. She was on Big Bang Theory and Blossom. Let's read her foreword. It was very good. When I was in elementary school, I knew two things. I liked comic books, and I didn't like science. Flash forward a few decades, and I have the unbelievable pleasure of writing a foreword to a comic book inspired guide to science. As a girl growing up in an overcrowded public school in Los Angeles in the 1980s, there was a very little time for asking for things to be repeated if I didn't understand them. Classes were 30 kids and resources in my school were scarce. In addition, math classes and science classes, we girls tended to shrink into our seats, and if you didn't understand long division or fractions for the first time through, many of us assumed that it just wasn't for us to understand. I excelled in storytelling and theater, and I liked to dance, and I sang in the choir. And that all suited me fine. How much do I even need math and science? At the least, that's what I thought then. Despite crying over my timetables for what seemed like years, science always held an elusive allure to me. I was curious by nature, as most children are, and I loved animals and especially mammals of the sea. Was there a way I could ever have the ability to swim with them and learn from them? I checked out Jacques Cousteau's books from the library and dreamed about descending into the depths of the ocean to discover amazing things. I was raised going into synagogue and believing in the forces of the universe, and something inside me wanted to believe that I could be one of the ones to really get it, to be able to describe the movement of all the planets and the molecules that make up everything, and to stand in awe of it. In high school, when I was 15, I got that opportunity. I was acting in a TV show called Blossom, and a 19-year-old dental undergraduate student at UCLA answered an ad in the paper to tutor me. This amazing woman, who is now an oral surgeon, introduced me to the beauty and elegance of the scientific world, and she gave me the skill set to succeed in science. I owe her the path my life has taken, and I am forever grateful to her. After I completed my work on Blossom, I went to UCLA in my hometown of Los Angeles and pursued an undergraduate degree and then a PhD in the study of brain and the nervous system. I became a neuroscientist. Well, my path has taken me from my PhD to my raising two sons who are now a tween and a teen and back into the world of acting. I got to play a neurobiologist on The Big Bang Theory for almost 10 years. And it was such a tremendous honor to get to show the world Amy Vera Fowler, a quirky, passionate, and lovable scientist. And even though I make my living as an actor now, my heart belongs to the world of atoms, invisible forces, and unimaginable awesomeness. I also have taught neuroscience, biology, and chemistry. And I devote my time to promoting the love and appreciation of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. My passion is presenting the wonders of these worlds to as many young people as possible in ways that work for them. This book is a perfect way to do that. Interestingly, the things I love about science are also the things comic books are made of. Since comics are so linked to understanding the universe we live in, whether it be creating characters with abilities that test the laws of physics, or using the accessibility of familiar personas we love to learn with and laugh with. The magic of the scientific world and the world of superheroes, robots, and mystery is ours to explore. This book is your fun, a fascinating and fantastic guide to everything in the STEM world. In a way you've never seen it before. It's not just Superman who can see inside of things. X-rays are real. And it's not just Batman who knows how investigators track criminals. Forensics is an entire field dedicated to tracking blood and understanding how everyone's genetics leave a mark wherever they go. Invisible forces in the universe do exist, and we can understand all about them with the use of specialized technology. We are living in the scientific world, and this book makes it easy and exciting to learn all about it in a way that will stick with you, inspire you, and get you fired up about STEM. Buckle up and get ready to have your mind blown. Mayim. So the first story is Fast Tracks by The Flash. We'll take a look at that in one moment. Okay, here's the first story. It's a Flash story. Flash does work as a forensic scientist, so it could be good. Chapter 1, Fast Tracks. Scientists and detectives have a lot in common. Both use a careful observation to uncover clues and make deductions about the world around them. But forensics scientists are even more like detectives because they are science to help. They use science to help, They use science to help the police solve crimes. That's what I do as Barry Allen. Even in my other identity as the Flash, I still think like a forensic scientist. And you can too. Let's see how you can do it. As the Flash, I use super speed to catch criminals like Mirror Master. And in my secret identity, I use scientific knowledge and practice to catch criminals as a crime scene or investigator, or CSI for short. Forensics crime labs have come a long way since a French scientist named Edmond Locard started the first one in 1910. But even more than a century later, modern forensics, still based on the cards exchange principle, the idea that whenever people or objects touch each other, the contact leaves traces behind. Those traces can be things criminals leave at a crime scene, like fingerprints, or they can be things like criminals take with them, like telltale mud on their shoes. Of course, everyone leaves traces behind, not just criminals. That's why police have to keep people away from a crime scene while they investigate. They have to make sure that any trace of evidence they find really did come from the crime and wasn't from something that was someone later accidentally left later. You probably know that investigators search for fingerprints, but other kinds of evidence can be important too. Even fibers, like tiny threads from someone's sleeve, can help prove that person was at a crime scene. Or a carpet fiber from the crime scene might get caught in the criminal's shoe. When a forensic investigator finds fibers at a crime scene, they study them under a microscope to try to figure out what kind of fibers they are and where they came from. They examine the color and the texture of the fibers and what they're made of. Some kinds of material, like wool or fur, come from an animal and are made of protein. Other kinds of materials, like cotton, come from plants. They look different under a microscope because they contain cellulose, not protein. Synthetic fibers, like polyester, are human-made and don't contain either protein or cellulose. Instead, they're made of polymer, sort of like plastic. Even without a microscope, you can analyze fibers yourself. Try using a magnifying glass to compare loose threads from a shirt with a piece of wool from a sweater. How are the threads in wool similar? What differences can you find? Not all trace evidence comes from clothing. Some of the traces that people leave behind come from their own bodies, too. For instance, bits of hair may fall from you when you wash or brush your hair, or even just as you move around. Finding strands of criminals' hair at a crime scene can help prove they were there. Even when we don't know whose hair it is, hairs can also give us clues to what the criminals look like. Forensics investigators check things like the color of the hair, whether it's straight or curly, or if it's been dyed. Investigators even check whether the hair comes from the human or an animal. In many species of animals, a microscope will show a medulla. That's a dark stripe made of keratin at the center of the hair. Human hair has a medulla that's much less pronounced or even hard to see at all. Of course, even if you know a hair is blonde or curly, there are lots of people who have blonde or curly hair to be certain that a hair came from one specific person. We need to test its DNA, but we'll talk about that later. I may be super fast, but I still don't want to get ahead of myself. Another useful kind of biological trace evidence is blood. Blood stains play a vital role in forensics, but not because you're hunting vampires. Investigators might find a trace of a victim's blood on a suspect's clothes, or criminals might leave a bit of their own blood behind at a crime scene. Say by cutting themselves while climbing through a broken window? Even if a criminal cleans up a crime scene, investigators can still find hidden traces of blood by spraying a chemical called luminol. If there are any unseen bits of blood around, luminol mixes with the iron in the blood that causes chemical reaction that gives off energy and makes the blood stain glow in the dark. Naturally, if investigators find traces of blood, one of the things they have to figure out is whose blood is it? One way to do that is by analyzing the blood types. Inside your veins and arteries, trillions of red blood cells bring oxygen to all parts of your body. Each red blood cell has markers called antigens. The antigens help your body's immune system tell the difference between cells that belong inside your body and infections that don't. Doctors and biologists use those antigens to identify your blood type. Type A blood has one type of antigen. Type B has another type. Type AB has both, and type O has neither. By identifying the blood type of a stain at the crime scene, investigators can narrow down the possibilities of whose blood it might be. Blood types don't tell the whole story, though. Many people have the same blood type. So even if the blood type of a stain matches one of the suspects, it doesn't guarantee that person committed the crime. To match a blood stain to an individual person, we have to dig deeper. Let's talk about DNA. Every cell in your body, hair, skin, even your fingernails, contains deoxyribonucleic. I really don't know how to pronounce this word. I know what it is, but deoxyribonucleic acid, which is better known as DNA. Sorry, I know I screwed that up. DNA is like a blueprint that tells your body what color eyes you'll have, whether you'll grow to be tall or short, and just about everything physical about you. No two people have the same DNA, so scientists can match the DNA in hair, blood, or saliva to the person it came from. Here's how it works. When investigators find DNA at a crime scene, we take samples of DNA from the innocent people who were there to see if it came from one of them. We also take samples from suspects to see if they match. Usually, there isn't much DNA at a crime scene. So the first step in the lab is to use the chemical reactions to copy the DNA until they're enough to analyze. Next, we separate the DNA from the sample and analyze it to create a DNA profile. Basically, a graph of the sequence of the DNA. Next, we check whether the DNA profile from the crime scene matches any of our suspects. The profile can be compared to a database of CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System. CODIS has DNA profiles from criminals all over the country, so we can see whether any of them match the DNA from the crime scene. The graph on top analyzes the DNA that was found at the crime scene. The other three show DNA from three possible suspects. Can you tell which one matches the DNA from the crime scene? If you found the right one, you just proved that person was at the crime scene and might have committed the crime. And that would be... Looks like that one matches, right? See the little spikes on, yeah. Suspect B. We got a match. What took so long? Between copying, separating, isolating, analyzing, and comparing DNA, the whole process of DNA testing takes time. TV shows make it look like seconds or minutes. But really, it takes several hours. Right now, the FDA is experimenting with a new test called rapid DNA that might shrink that time down to as little as 90 minutes. How's that for super speed? Speaking of new developments, here's a question to think about. Since DNA is a blueprint of a person's body, could you use DNA found at a crime scene to build a picture of the criminal who committed the crime? You might be surprised to hear that the answer is maybe. As genetics and other scientists study DNA and learn more about it, their research helps identify which DNA markers determine each physical trait, like eye color and hair color. But DNA is very complicated. It's little likely to be many years before scientists understand it completely. It's possible that in the future, forensics investigators could use the genetic information in a DNA sample to generate a picture of the person who left that DNA behind. The idea is just science fiction now, but someday it could be science fact. Until then, investigators still have plenty of kinds of evidence to help them solve crimes today, from scraps of cloth to microscopic DNA. Trace evidence comes in all shapes and sizes. Now that you've learned about different kinds of trace evidence, are you ready to test your skills and think like a forensic scientist? Let's check out a crime scene together and see if you can figure out who done it. Late last night, someone broke into the vault of the Central City Jewelry Exchange and stole a fortune in diamonds. Try to use the clues to figure out who did it and how. Oops, but first we need to find some clues. It shouldn't take more than a millisecond for me to search for the store for trace evidence. This is where the super speed comes in handy. Okay, there aren't any fingerprints on the vault, not even from the people who work here. That means thief probably wiped them away. But I did find a few pieces of evidence, puddles of water on the floor in front of the vault, and some white threads and brown hair. The store's custodians clean up at the end of each day, so there's bits of trace evidence probably came from the thief. Before you continue to the next page, you can use the evidence to figure out which rogue stole the gems. Here's a rogue gallery of supervillains who are currently on the loose. And we've got Captain Boomerang, weapons, explosive boomerangs. Captain Cold, weapons, freeze gun. Pied Piper, weapon, hypersonic flute. Weather Wizard, weapon, weather control wand. Heat wave, weapon, flame gun. Gorilla Grodd, weapon, super strength, and mind control. Now I'm going to make my guess and say Captain Cold because we found water, which would be the melting of his ice. We found the white fibers, which would be from his costume. And he probably has brown hair. That's my guess, but I'm not a scientist. Do you have your answer? Let's check the clues one at a time. The white threads could have come from a rogue whose uniform has white in it. That could be either Heat Wave or Captain Cold or Captain Boomerang. Super strength or a high-tech flute wouldn't leave a puddle of water behind. But there might be puddles if Weather Wizard hit the vault with a hurricane, or if Captain Cold froze the vault door to sub-zero temperatures and shattered it. Even analyzing it for DNA, the hair also helps narrow down our suspects, because the only rogues with brown hair are Captain Boomerang, Pied Piper, and Captain Cold. DNA testing will give us the final proof, but it'll take a day or two. Meanwhile, we don't have to wait that long to make an arrest, because only one rogue fits all the evidence. And by racing through the entire city at super speed, I should find our thief. Captain Cold. I should have known after all the criminals, sometimes called diamonds, ice. You won't catch me, Flash. Not with a different kind of ice in the way. Are you sure? At my speed, I can smash right through a solid barricade. At least there's our last piece of evidence, the stolen diamonds falling out of your pockets. Whoa! Of course, most forensic investigators can't shake the loot out of criminals' pockets at super speed, but even real-life analyzing and trace evidence can give investigators all the evidence they need to solve a crime. And that's a Flash fact. So, okay, yeah, this wasn't the most scientific and adult story we've read ever, but it was fun. Learned a little bit about forensics. I didn't know a lot about the blood types, and there's always stuff to be learned. So, anyways, I hope you had fun. I did, and we're gonna read "If You Can't Take the Heat" another day. All right, stay tuned, folks.